1. I'm a 19-year-old male and used to work at a small smoke shop in a rougher part of town. I wanted a part-time job that didn't require too much physical labor because I was going through some medical problems at that time that made it difficult for me to lift heavy loads without feeling lightheaded and nauseous. The pay wasn't great, but I felt the $10 an hour was reasonable given the amount of work that needed to be done throughout the day was minimal. All I needed to do for the most part was keep the shop clean and sell product, which I was fine with. When I first met the owner, he seemed like a genuine dude. He cared a lot about profits like any business owner would, but the other employees there assured me that he cares about his employees and would take care of me. So I figured, alright, cool. There were 3 other people that I worked with there other than the boss. The first week I worked was great, but when my first payday came around and I asked how it worked, the boss told me to take $200 out of the register and leave a note. Looking back, that should have been red flag number 1, that something fishy was going on, but after doing the math, he wasn't withholding tax. So I was getting paid more than I should have been. I asked my coworkers if this was normal, and they said it was, and said that he did payroll this way so that he could avoid taxes. Now, a rational person would hear this and stay as far away from this business as possible. But at the time, I really enjoyed the job and found out that I was really good at selling merchandise, so I decided to stay. Around a month or 2 in, the boss started to show his true colors. Every time I would make a minor mistake, example, accidentally putting a card transaction as cash on the register, he would talk down to me like I was the stupidest person on the planet, and he would call me on the store phone to do so while I had a line of customers. I also started to notice that sometimes on payday he would tell me to take an amount from the drawer that was less than what I was supposed to get. I would call him out on it and he would fix it, but remember this for later. The boss would also get in really dumb arguments with Ivan, one of the other employees, frequently, and he would make it clear to the rest of us that he didn't like Ivan whatsoever. The boss cut his hours. Ivan has a couple of children to take care of and didn't tolerate this, so he quit on the spot. Which, with all the stuff he had to put up with, I didn't blame him. But with his absence, I had to pick up some of his hours. Then my other colleague, Nancy, was getting ready to move because her wife in the military just got out of basic training. So Nancy gave the boss a month's notice before she had to leave, and the boss did not like it. He would take every opportunity he could to lash out at her, and even started making misogynistic remarks like, "Nancy should be the only one to clean the bathroom because she's a woman, and women make the bathroom dirtier," which she didn't. During this time, the boss told my colleague Caden and I that he didn't want to hire anybody and that he only needs us good employees to keep the store running. But after Nancy left, the schedule only consisted of me and Caden since the boss was finished getting his new location up and running. But Caden has another day job as an electrician and wouldn't be able to come in until 7 p.m. most days, which left me to open Monday to Sunday at 9 a.m. and work until 7 or until Caden came in. As you could imagine, I was not happy with this arrangement. I signed up for a part-time position, and there I was working close to 70-hour weeks, with the boss calling me at least twice a day to cheer me out. I kept asking if I could take a day or 2 off from the shop because working 10-hour days every day was exhausting. Some of the regular customers were even getting a little concerned because every time they came in, I was always the one behind the counter. But he kept giving me a sob story about how he can't get Caden to pull a double shift. During my shifts at this time, I was easily earning my boss $1,500 to $2,000 in profit per day. I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I feel that I'm a pretty good salesman. But he never gave me any sort of raise in pay whatsoever. The boss eventually decided to hire someone else, and I do mean someone as one person, and this dude said he could only work part-time, and for whatever reason, the boss accepted that request, but none of mine. The final straw for me was when payday came one week, and he only paid me $600 for a 72-hour week. I didn't even need to do the math on that one to realize he was screwing me. What made it worse was that day he gave me a little speech about how he appreciated everything I did for him. I was fuming with anger at this point, but decided to finish out my shift. The next morning, I was training the new guy, and maybe an hour after my shift started, I decided I'd had enough of the way my boss treated me. I gave my store key to the new guy and told him that I was quitting, and warned him about the boss's behavior and how he'll likely get treated in the future. I made sure that the new guy knew that I had nothing against him, but I wasn't going to continue to work for someone who wasn't going to pay me what he agreed to. I walked out feeling like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and blocked my boss on everything. Obviously, the new guy told the boss what happened, and he tried to call me from 5 different phone numbers throughout the week, and ignored all of them. I heard from Caden that he had to close his new location for almost a week, so he could work my shifts, which lost him a whole lot of money. If I had to guess, it would be close to $5,000 to $6,000 in profit loss, which is a lot of money he could have saved just by paying me what I was owed. But that isn't where the story ends, folks. I didn't know it yet, but I had one last cherry to add to this shitstorm ice cream. A week or so goes by, and I notice that someone at the shop was using my Spotify account. I forgot to log out of my account on the sound system for the shop, and let me tell you, I got so excited. I had a buddy of mine go in as a customer to witness what I was about to do. I found a playlist called Worst Songs to Have Sex To, filled with songs like Cotton Eye Joe and the Barney and Caillou theme songs. And I wish I could have gone inside to see my boss's face as he tries in vain to change the music. But my buddy's recount will have to do. He kept trying to change the music back, but every time he did, I had my phone ready in my hand to unleash the reading rainbow. My buddy came back to the car, and we were laughing all the way home. So, moral of the story, don't mess with your employee's paycheck. 2. This happened a few years back. My dad found out he was super allergic to some kind of shrub in central Texas, in Fort Hood, after he was transferred there. As a result, he was restricted to office work and prohibited by Army doctors from outdoor duties. His West Point grad commanding officer was a hyper-warrior kind of dude who detested soldiers who didn't want to train 24/7. Unfortunately, he thought my dad was milking his allergies in order to avoid being a real soldier. My dad was also married, and my mom was pregnant with my older sister, a situation that infuriated the captain because reasons. The CO never passed an opportunity to humiliate my dad by questioning his manhood, doubting his commitment to protecting the Constitution, disparaging his duties, etc. The CO would call him out in front of the company or debase him in front of higher HQ staff. He'd call the house at 6 a.m. on Sunday and order Dad in for bullshit reasons. Anything to piss him off. In short, he made his life a living hell. For what is worth, the first sergeant loved my dad's work performance and said so privately. When my dad got orders to leave active duty, which enraged the CO, he found out that the CO received orders for an assignment that was a notch needed to guarantee promotions, as well as other plum jobs. Dad decided to mess with his official records before leaving. As company clerk, he had full access to unit personnel files, orders, etc., which meant he also had keys to the building as well. This was during the pre-digital, pre-computer era. The night before my dad was to get out, he took all the captain's personnel folders and mailed them separately and anonymously to various posts around the globe, knowing full well it would take weeks to deliver them to geographically unrelated unit mailrooms throughout the world that may or may not open the packages in order to return them. It just so happened that the unit was in the field for a 2-week exercise on the day my dad left, which meant a skeleton crew would man the phones and mow lawns until they returned from the field. No one was the wiser for weeks. One of my dad's old poker-playing sergeant buds wrote a few months later, telling him that the captain went ballistic, that the missing files seriously damaged the fuckface of a captain's career prospects since some of the files were lost in the system. Therefore, the coveted assignment orders were cancelled, and the entire personnel record had to be reconstructed manually by the Department of the Army. My dad said it was a teaching moment for a cruel asshole that you should never mess with your unit clerk, because even chairborne rangers know how to seriously wound enemies, foreign and domestic. 3. The Tale of Methany and All Her Madness. This happened a few years ago. I once had a neighbor that we will call Methany. Methany moved into our neighborhood as a single mom with 3 kids. At the time she moved in, all the kids were between 5 and 8. One of the kids, Chris, was the oldest and had some mental and physical disabilities that, from what we heard, was from him having a brain tumor or cancer. The story changed through the years. Now, when Methany moved in, it seemed like she was just an overwhelmed single mom of 3 that had a lot of friends coming by all the time. I can understand this being normal with 3 kids and one with medical needs. A few months after move-in, the amount of people who were stopping by, when they were stopping by, the length of the visit, the condition of the person arriving and leaving, all started to seem odd, to say the least. We live in a cul-de-sac in a suburban city outside of Seattle, so most people, when doing yard work, wave at the neighbor's AC and make small talk or smile or something. Not Methany. If you were in your yard doing yard work, she would start to get sketched out. She would make comments of,
"What are you looking at?"
and
"Mind your own business."
Okay, if that's not a red flag, I don't know what is. So in the future, she started to get more aggressive, throwing water balloons at people, which at first we thought she filled with vinegar, since it killed anything it touched. Later found out it was piss. Soon she then turned to building a tarp shanty, for privacy for herself and her guests. After this happened, the visitors and things that would happen would get more weird. Call the cops and file complaints with the city for code violations. Things would change for a few weeks to a month, and then back to business as usual. At this time, we started to see Chris more and more at our door and things. This is when he would ask us for food and if we had an old sweatshirt or jacket he could have, because he outgrew his. It is snowing and the kid has on shorts, a t-shirt, and flip-flops. He just walked home from school. He had eaten mustard for lunch and had it on his face and shirt still. His mother didn't send him with money or have groceries for lunch. We hooked him up with some food and clothes, and he was on his way home. That is what we saw when he tried to enter the house and a man wouldn't let him and turned him away. Our neighborhood called CPS. They came and took him away a few days later. They're back. And this is when we found out that she'd been living in Section 8 housing. You would think at this point she would either change her ways or she would lose this place and opportunity that she was given. Nope, it only got worse. At this point, she was full-on drug dealing 24/7 in the open, with a loud truck coming and going and blaring music all hours of the night. Shortly after this, her house and vehicle are the subject of a drive-by shooting. A couple of months after that, a dump truck filled with fertilizer dirt is dropped onto her convertible car right after she had drove it home. It took her and a few of her minions to get the car unburied. She sold it shortly after and somehow got a new Dodge Ram. It was not long before she was doing a fuel muralist picture on the side of the truck with various rattle can techniques. Of course, she needed to do some exhaust alterations as well because she wants to set off car alarms as she drives by. The tension in the neighborhood started to build, and for some reason, I was the one who was told all the dirt and did something with it. Everyone else is over 75 and retired, or a single woman living by themselves. My husband and myself are in our late 20s and early 30s and went to physical jobs for 10 or 12 hours a day, 5 to 7 days a week. We really didn't have the patience or time to have our sleep disrupted. I went to confront Methany to turn down the music and please be respectful of the noise ordinance, or in future I will call the police. She then informed me that she was friends with the people that work at the 911 call center and an officer will never show up. Well, she was wrong. They showed up and she was pushed to her limit. At this point, she had so much hate for me that she couldn't contain herself. A couple of weeks later, I was leaving for work at 2:30 a.m. I get in my car and realize I left my lunch inside. I grab my purse, but I leave my car running and grab it off the counter. As soon as I open my front door to go out to my car, I see Methany's motion sensor is now on. I look over, my car is gone. I was in the house for under a minute. She had been watching me closely, as threatened in the past. I called the cops. They found it later that afternoon, less than a mile away. You don't want to hoof it too far after you abandon your neighbor's car you stole. It was also pretty amazing because they left all the drug paraphernalia behind, and that was when the name Methany was born. She really thought she won that time. But what she didn't plan was me being the vengeful witch I am. Now I knew that all I needed to do was wait. Her activities would resume, and up to the level just as they had every other time. But this time I was going to document everything with every detail in pictures, videos, and everything else she would do. Then one fateful Friday night, I got onto the community service website for anonymous tips and just loaded up my 200-plus document file I had made and categorized so they could go through it all as easily as possible. Well, wouldn't you know, on Tuesday afternoon someone got raided and arrested. It was not long before she was bailed out, within hours of being released back at it. So I guess I just gotta add to my file again before I do another big upload in my homegirl Methany. By Sunday that same week, I had over another 100 pieces of documents to add. At this point, I uploaded it, and by Wednesday, she was raided and arrested again. She did lose the house by the end of that month. 4. Before I start, let's make something clear. I am not the good person in this story. We were both bad. I'm not here trying to get pats on the back or be told that I did well. I know that what I did was messed up. I'm here because I wanted to tell someone, and I can't do that in real life. 10 years ago, and by complete coincidence, I found out that my husband has been cheating on me with men, and doing so from before we got married. We live in a smallish town in the south of the USA. Him coming out as gay will have consequences. I believe that is the only reason that he has not come out to anyone. First, here's how I found out he was cheating on me. He got sloppy. He left a credit card bill for a secret card in the pocket of a coat. While going through it, I found all the telltale signs of infidelity. Payments to a hotel in a nearby county, restaurant bills, gifts, flowers, condoms, and lubricant, etc. I started camping outside the hotel on days he told me he would be late, and I saw him bringing different men there. I'm very good at compartmentalization, and I have a great poker face, comes with growing up in an abusive household. So I was able to give myself time to cool off and come up with what I should do. First thing I did was get an STD panel. Since I didn't know how safe he was with his partners, it came out negative. Then I convinced him that we should use condoms. Since I was having side effects from the pill, he was okay with it. I had a long think and came up to the decision that I was not going to confront him, nor was I going to leave him. He was able to provide me a really good lifestyle, one that I would never be able to afford with my high school diploma. A cleaning lady and nanny to help with kids, regular spa days in a country club, a new car every other year, luxury family vacations every year. He was a good dad, a good partner, the cheating aside, and really good in bed. But I was not going to let him have a single guilt-free week in his life. That would be my revenge. I started small, planning great date nights for us, telling him that I felt our relationship has cooled, that I wanted the spark back. Then I sometimes slip into the conversation, some tea about a cheating husband, a gay man that has been using his poor wife as a beard, complimenting the gay couple we know for having the courage to be real men who were out and proud of themselves. On the other hand, I would praise him as the perfect husband to anyone and everyone, especially if he was in earshot. The amount of guilt gifts I got was astounding. The man was even sending me flowers weekly. It continued the same way for years. I could literally see how much it was weighing on him. Me? Well, my parents were part of a commune with the concept of free love. I was the same. I just considered myself in an open marriage. It seems that cheating is easier to ignore if you're not that big on monogamy in the first place, and my husband was keeping me satisfied, so I felt no need to find a partner of my own. Then, 4 years ago, I guess he met the love of his life. He started seeing just the one guy. I was seriously thinking of ending the whole thing, especially since I had started a business by then, and was able to bring in enough money to support myself and my kids, while maintaining my lifestyle. But then he went and introduced his side piece to us. He fucking brought him into our house, introduced him to our kids, and that was enough for me to keep tormenting him. Apparently he was just a new friend he made while golfing. He started hinting at moving to another state, one where it would be easier for him to come out. I refused. I told him that my business was here and I was not going to start over in another state. Also, the kids had their friends and extended family here. It would be unfair to uproot them. Then he started trying to start arguments. I guess he wanted us to fight, then for me to ask for a divorce. I just stopped all those arguments in their tracks. I would just agree with whatever he said. He was right, I was wrong. And to make it up to him, how about a nice dinner and some great sex? He hated that. I knew from spying on his phone that having sex with me felt like cheating on his boyfriend. The audacity of this man. I also knew that his boyfriend was pressuring him to leave me almost every day. He was stuck between a rock and a hard place. He started drinking, and when it got too heavy, that's when I decided that enough was enough. I wanted to ruin his life, not his health. Also, I grew up with an alcoholic father and did not want that for my kids. So I gathered all the evidence of his infidelity over the last 9 years, photos with different men, conversations, his Grindr profile, though he no longer had one, everything. Then I hired a divorce attorney and mailed the evidence to his employer. He has a morality clause in his contract, and adultery breaks it. All his relatives, including parents, as well as our church. Actually, I was never big on religion like him. It was like a bomb exploded. He was fired. The congregation turned on him for cheating, not for being gay. Let's keep that straight. I would never allow my kids to be part of a church that discriminated against their father, even if he was not out. His parents wouldn't take him in after I kicked him out, and he was shamed publicly. Gotta love that small-town gossip mill. And the cherry on top? His boyfriend was run out of town, and he couldn't follow him because he wanted to fight for custody of our kids. Now, almost a year later, I am a free woman. I got to keep the house, my car, and my business. He got 75% of the retirement and investments accounts, but he won't be paying alimony. I got full custody, he got visitations. I also got child support. He had to move 6 hours away to find a new job. Couldn't put the last job he worked at his whole life as a reference. His relationship with his family is rocky. His reputation in town is ruined. So he can't move back anytime soon. And the love of his life left him for good. And my kids only tolerate him because I did my best to shield them, and to tell them that he is still a good father to them. I also made sure to treat him politely, never talked bad about him, and had a lengthy talk about how their father being gay is okay. It's who he is, and that it was not his fault. That the only thing he did wrong was hiding it from me. So I guess the results of his cheating was years of guilt, followed by a ruined life. 5. The events of this story take place during my teen years. 13 to 17 years old, when my mother and I moved into a new rental property. The details might be a bit patchy here, as I don't have a lot of good memories associated with this house, and I've done my best to forget about a lot of the events of these years. However, I do have one good memory of PettyRevenge I got one day on a neighbor. Just to give you a little backstory, my family had very limited funds at the time, and had just used what little spare money we had on moving expenses. We couldn't afford to move again, so didn't advocate as much for ourselves as we should have. Literally on the day we moved in, we turned on the radiator heaters and discovered that the radiators couldn't be turned on, as they caused a leak in the living room ceiling. The landlord was aware of this but wouldn't be fixing it, and told us to buy a space heater to keep warm in the winter. Neither would he be fixing the broken downstairs bathroom or replacing the roof. And he told us that if we wanted the walls painted, we could buy paint and do it ourselves. We hadn't asked about paint, he just volunteered that we could put our time and resources into improving his house if we wanted to. Which of course we didn't want to. The worst thing he ever did was open our door one Saturday morning without notice or knocking, while we were still in our beds upstairs, and shout into our house that he was just checking in. This was a violation of our lease, and he left without telling us that he had let our sick cat outside when he opened the door. Luckily, I found the little guy on the porch across the street later that day, but I was so mad at our landlord. This story isn't about horrible landlords, though. It's about our neighbors, Karen and Ken, both 40. The backstory was to explain why we wanted nothing to do with our terrible landlord, and it just so happened that the day we moved in, Karen and Ken, who lived next door, told us that they were his friends, implying that if we did anything they didn't like, he'd be hearing about it. It was hard to avoid Karen and Ken since we share the front porch with them. row house, and they were true to their word. If our lawn got too shabby, Karen and Ken let him know. If our trash cans didn't have lids, Karen and Ken called the county to put violation stickers on our cans. If the rat inspector was in the neighborhood, they sent the inspector under our back porch. It was like walking on eggshells in our own home. Despite all this, or because of it, we tried to stay on good terms with these terrible neighbors for the first couple of years. We wouldn't say anything to Ken when he came into our yard for dandelion greens for his pet iguana, without even asking for permission. Then, around when I was 15 years old, Ken asked me if he could hire me for a job. He and his family would be going on a family vacation that winter, and he needed a dog walker for his daughter's dog. We agreed on a rate, I don't remember how much, and I walked his dog for him 3 times a day for 2 weeks, even when it snowed. The dog was elderly and didn't give me any trouble, but I could have done without the bad weather. My mother was very proud of me for taking the job, as she hoped that this would be a fresh start with this family and that we'd get on better terms. Once Ken and his family returned from vacation, I gave him an update on his daughter's dog and told him how well behaved she'd been. I expected him to pay me, but he didn't say anything about money. Since I was a shy teenager, I went home without payment, but asked him about it next time I saw him. He said,
"It's my daughter's dog. Ask her for your money."
His daughter was a college student who wasn't even home that much, but I couldn't force him to pay me, so just left again without payment. About a week later, I saw his daughter, probably home for the weekend from college, but she didn't have any money when I asked, and she said tell her dad to pay me. Guess what happened next time I asked him? He was angry this time and repeated what he said the first time, even when I mentioned asking his daughter. Yeah, I never got paid, and my mother and I were too scared to ask again. Looking back in this, I feel like they knew how intimidated we were on their relationship with our landlord. One call to him about us harassing them, and we'd be homeless. They knew we were terrified of them, and they'd never have to pay me for walking their dog. Yeah, they took advantage of a 15-year-old kid. Around this time, or maybe a year later, my mom had a conversation with Karen. Karen had actually been friendly recently. She took an artistic photo of our cat in our kitchen window, a black and white photo with interesting lighting going across the cat's face, which she gave to my mom since she thought it looked pretty. We thought the whole interaction was odd, since Karen admitted to hating cats in the past, but my mom accepted the photo like an olive branch. Then Karen mentioned a tree growing in our backyard. It was what we call in this area a trash tree, since it's the fast-growing variety. She said she was worried it was going to drop seeds into her yard and spread, but her brother could help us with it if we liked, for $100. My mom considered it and thought it was a good price, so she agreed. Looking back on it, I know that our landlord probably should have been the one to pay for this, but my mom was worried he'd come to the house to cut it down himself, so she agreed to let Karen's brother do it. Over the course of 2 days, Karen's brother cut down the tree and hauled away the rubbish. When he sent us the bill, it was $300. When my mom asked about the price, he insisted that the job was bigger than he'd anticipated, which resulted in 3 times the cost. He got angry about being questioned as well, so my mom cut him a check. This was the second time we'd felt taken advantage of by them. My mom was a single mother struggling to make ends meet, and they knew this. $300 was a lot of money for us. They constantly reminded us of their relationship with our landlord, being sure to stand outside and chat with him for 30 minutes following our biannual inspections. On one particular visit, the landlord stared at our front yard as if expecting it to be shabby and said,
"It looks good." I don't know what they were talking about.
Since he'd obviously been informed otherwise. No matter what we did, Karen and Ken hated us and wanted us gone, and wouldn't stop mentioning any little thing they could to our landlord. At a certain point, around when I was 17 years old, we stopped making nice with them. No more cordial smiles and waves were exchanged on either side. On one particular day, my mom and I were gardening in the front yard. Ken, who was a little less hostile than his wife, did greet us as he opened his front door. He left it open as he was painting and walked away. And here comes the revenge. Our neighborhood had a bit of a feral cat problem. We'd been feeding the cats, which Ken and Karen in particular viewed as vermin. Perhaps that's why they hated us. My mom was friends with another woman in the neighborhood who was helping to catch and fix the cats. One cat in particular that hung out in our yard was gray and less than a year old. I'll call her Jillian for the purpose of this story. Jillian was usually stuck in the backyard, which is why I was surprised to see her in the front yard while gardening. She was a feral cat who had never been in a house in her whole life. So I was shocked to see her sniffing around Ken's open front door. I didn't expect her to go into their house, but I didn't discourage her. And inside she went. I started laughing, picturing the look on Karen's face when she saw a cat in her house. I love cats, so if I'd been a little older, I probably would have kept Jillian away from those people to protect her. But as a teenager, all I could think of was the satisfaction of getting sweet, petty revenge on Karen and her husband after all the years of grief they put us through. And then I heard it. That shrill scream and running footsteps. I did my best to stifle my laughter, knowing what had happened. Karen was facing her worst nightmare, a small, fluffy adolescent kitten. My conscience was eating at me a bit, because I didn't know what those people would do to Jillian, and also, maybe I could get a closer look. I knocked on the ajar door and asked if everything was okay, since I'd heard a scream. Ken told me there was a cat in his house, and asked if it was mine, even though he knows we had inside cats only. I told him it was a feral cat who'd never been handled. But I volunteered assistance in catching her. Ken led me upstairs where I sought that sweet, sweet pro-revenge. Ken said the cat was in the bathroom, and as I walked down the hallway, Karen peeked around the door, perhaps wondering who her husband was talking to. Then she looked back to the bathroom, eyes wide and wild, and let out another shriek. I was looking at a grown woman in her 40s screaming at a little cat like it was a rat. I don't know how I didn't laugh again in her face as she slammed the bedroom door to hide, but I'll never forget the look in her face. It was so worth it. With Ken behind me, I went into his bathroom. The cat was climbing the shower curtain, and I didn't blame Jillian for being scared. I was scared of Karen too. She let me hold her under the armpits, away from my body, and didn't bite or scratch as I lifted her off the shower curtain and carried her out of the house to be released back into the yard. Ken thanked me, but he gave me a suspicious look like he thought the cat might have been mine since she didn't attack me. But I didn't care about his unvoiced suspicion. I'd gotten to see his ridiculous wife acting like an elephant who was spooked by a mouse. Things didn't improve with the neighbors, not that we'd expected them to. They even complained a year later when we moved about how much space our moving van took up on the day we finally got out of that house. I adopted Jillian and took her with me when I moved. I still own her to this day, and she's no longer feral. Sometimes I pet her and think about that revenge she helped me get on Karen. I know it was a small payback on those people, but the real win was finally getting away from them. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 245. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Please do boink the like button before you go, thank you kindly. Okay, I think we have a little shout out to do today, actually. Let's see. Yes, we do. The shout out goes to the author of story number 1. That was the story that took place in the smoke shop with the owner that didn't know how to pay taxes. So thank you very much, James the Greek guy, for allowing us to use your story. Alrighty, I don't think there's any other business today, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, if you could pick a fairy tale character as your best friend, which character would it be? I'm going to pick the witch from Hansel and Gretel, because if we overlook the eating children thing, she really knew how to bake. I mean, she built a whole house out of confectionery. And that's got to be worth something. So if I could just talk her down from eating people, I think we got along great. You might have a different answer for different reasons, but what can I say? I like cake. Please leave your answers in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now and record more stories. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.